welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, this is Jessica with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. I am here with an author who I spoke to about the first book in this duology last year, and very, very excited to have you back, Alex Kennington.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to be back.
So, first of all, I've got so many questions about just your conception of this story from start to finish. But how long did it take you to write both Gods Beneath the Ice and the first book?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first book took me quite a long time. It was really the first book that I had ever decided, like I was an aspiring author for a long time, and that was the book that I sat down and I thought to myself, okay, I want to finish this. Obviously, it was not great when I did finish it. So from the time that I conceptualized it to the time that it hit shelves was a little more than 5 years. And during that time, I rewrote it multiple times and just had to keep scrapping it and starting over. It's really the book that, as I wrote it and edited that book, it taught me how to write in some ways, which was really interesting. And then by comparison, Gods Beneath the Ice was the first book that I wrote while contracted to a specific deadline. So that was its own unique experience too. I wrote Gods Beneath the Ice. I want to say it took me to get the first draft down probably like 4 or 5 months. And then from there, it was, lots of back and forth editing. I did a pretty major overhaul of it during the editing process. And so by the time all was said and done, I think it was about a year from start to when I finally handed it off and it was out of my hands. So yeah.
So this particular story is the first one was completely Revna. Now we have dual points of view. Um, so how did, so that's actually really interesting that you talk about sort of your writing process and how it evolved from Blood Beneath the Snow. When you started writing Blood Beneath the Snow, were you expecting Soren's point of view to be a big part of the sequel?
I really wasn't. His kind of caught me by surprise. As I was plotting and outlining for Gods Beneath the Ice, I was looking at it, and there were just certain puzzle pieces of the story that I knew needed to come from his point of view. There's like the whole discovering of who the true villain is was very much a complicated process to kind of like, okay, here's where they figure it out. Here are all the clues leading up to it. And like as they piece the puzzle together. And some of it I just knew, Revna knows most of it, but Soren in his position being very just closer to the country on the other side of the war, he was closer with a lot of the characters who were involved in finding those clues. And so there were things that he knew that I kept thinking, oh, I need this information coming forward. And a lot of it I thought just felt a lot better coming from his point of view. And I think it had, the dual effect of, building that relationship arc between them too. That was a lot of fun to experiment with. And he was a fun character to write his point of view. But yeah, that did catch me by surprise.
Yeah, I think it caught the readers by surprise too. Not in a bad way though. I think
Mhm.
that's something that I guess when you're reading a romance, it adds a different it adds another level to it.
Yes.
And I know dual point of view has become more popular for that reason because I think it kind of gives you just that rounded feeling as to how certain things happen. But with this, it's not just romance. It's magic, it's political intrigue. What for you, just in the writing process and fleshing that out, and like did you know who the villain was, first of all?
Ooh. For the most part, yes. I had kind of an idea from the beginning of who the villain was and who was playing behind the scenes and kind of stirring the pot per se. I didn't know though, like I had known that, but I didn't know exactly how it was going to happen or how it was going to work out until I really started plotting the second book.
So with all that in mind, how was your process then really different, writing this one versus the other one? Did you find the dual points of view more difficult?
I think the dual points of view ended up feeling pretty natural, but my process was very different than it was for the first book. This was also the first time I had written a sequel, so like a continuation with characters that already had pages written about them and who already had personalities that were previously established. And so I very much I worked at it from the end backwards. I thought to myself, okay, like I know where they are at the end of book one, and I know where I want them to be at the end of book two, and how can I get them from point A to point B in a way that makes sense and that doesn't feel rushed or paced strangely. Um, but it was definitely a different experience. I think with writing the first book of any kind of story, there's this sense of like, well, it could go anywhere, it could be anything, and that's a lot of fun. And then this time it was very much like, okay, I know where they're going, and there are very careful outlines that have been set up in book one. I have to not only stay within those lines, but make sure that all the open-ended questions from book one get answered by all of the things that happen in book two. So it was a different challenge. It felt a lot more like putting together a puzzle versus writing the first book very much felt like throwing stuff onto the page and seeing like, okay, what felt most exciting? What could I play with?
So the idea of a duology, was that your idea, or were you just like kind of contracted to a duology? Would you revisit this world after this book?
Oh, that's a good question. I was contracted to a duology, and so I hadn't really planned out, what exactly I wanted the story to be after the first book. I knew from the beginning that I was pursuing traditional publishing, and the advice I had gotten was, don't write any sequels because if you have to make changes from an agent or an editor, then you might have to scrap everything you've written. So write one book and then kind of go from there. So I knew that like there was going to be at least one sequel. But yeah, so when I was contracted to a duology, it was kind of like, okay, like I have some of the ideas and I was able to kind of play around with those. I don't know if I would revisit this world. I mean, I really love it. I think that there are other stories that I could tell. I have one or two in mind that like come up as thoughts of, oh, okay, well, I could explore that person or that person. I do think Revna and Soren, though, that this is kind of the conclusion of their story.
That said, do you start with relationship, or does, world building and plot come before?
It's been a little bit different for me with every book. I think for this duology in particular, it was Revna who came to me first. The concept of having her be the only royal child without magic, and then also the concept of the fight to the death between the siblings for the throne. And so from there, it was a lot of questions about like, okay, well, what kind of world would it need to be to where like rulers are having that kind of really brutal competition? And what kind of people does that make these royals and her siblings? And how does that shape her? And what can they do and where can they go from there? So this one was definitely character first, and then the world kind of built itself around the concept and the characters that I already had.
Well, I am really excited to see what you have in the future. Like I said, like I think people are going to really like the conclusion to this, and I think people are going to want to revisit this world. So, if you haven't closed the door, don't do it. That is if your publisher allows it. Are you working on anything else at the moment?
Yes, I am. So I have another book coming out this fall, actually. The cover reveal was yesterday, but it's called Drown the Bones. And that's also a new adult romantasy. So kind of that, like a little bit older than YA sort of genre. But yeah, it's about a princess who she's the spare heir, but her twin brother is murdered, and she decides that she's going to do anything it takes to find the killer, even if that means using heathen magic and betraying her goddess and then even allying with the ghost of her rival kingdom's prince.
That sounds incredible.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Man, so I guess like with just some of the time we have left, I'm curious, what do you enjoy reading and watching? Do you read in your genre? Do you watch in like TV or play video games in your genre, or do you like to sort of sample a little bit of everything?
That's a good question. I do read in my genre. I know there are some people who don't like to do that. I love doing it. It inspires me a lot, and I feel like there's nothing better than reading a book where I close it and I think, oh, I want to write something that makes other people feel the way that made me feel. But yeah, I've been reading a lot of good stuff lately. I just recently read The Road of Bones by Demi Winters. That series, another one just came out in that series, and it was really delightful. But yeah, I'm trying to think of what else I've been reading lately. I haven't been doing a ton of reading because I'm on a deadline, but yeah, and then I watch some shows. I'm not a huge TV person, but I'll watch one occasionally. I really liked there was a TV adaptation of the Murderbot Diaries, and I loved that. I thought that was really well done. And then I play some video games here and there, but usually nothing too intense. I'm talking like Lego Star Wars level video games. So
Well, again, I think everyone's going to be really happy with this one. I cannot wait to read Drown the Bones. That sounds like such a cool concept.
thank you.
This was Jessica with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. Our guest today was,
Alexandra Kennington.
and we are going to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.